Welcome to the Media Navigators podcast, brought to you by the World Media Group. My name's Belinda Barker and I'm the Chief Executive. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the two co-head judges for the World Media Awards. It's genuinely a great honour to be talking to two people at the peak of their careers. They're both genuinely interesting and very funny. There might be people questioning why the World Media Awards are happening now. With so much happening in the world with the pandemic and COVID. But in reality, I think it's actually even more important. The creative industry has been hit really hard, like many other industries, with redundancies, people on furlough, but the people who have been left behind to continue making business happen, they are naturally creative people who like working together. So working in lockdown has been intensely difficult, and to have been able to create incredible, compelling, engaging campaigns under those circumstances, I think really deserve to be celebrated. The World Media Awards are kind of unique in the way they're designed, because they're not, they're extra complicated, they're extra difficult, because we're celebrating effectiveness of campaigns that are not only cross-platform, they have to be cross-border, targeting a minimum of 3 countries, and involving content-led advertising. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our two amazing head judges. First of all, Shula Sinclair, who's the Global Head of Strategy at Spark Foundry. Welcome, Shula. How are you this morning?
Hello, Belinda. Thank you. Yes, very well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Looking forward to the chat with Fabio.
And as Shula just mentioned, our second head judge is Fabio Mancone, and who's a partner at Lombard Odier. Welcome, Fabio. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you, Belinda. Hi, Shula. Very glad as well to be here.
Fabio, you've had an eclectic career, perhaps is the way I should term it. And very international as well, working in, I worked out, is it Milan, Geneva, Paris, Belgium, New York?
Rome, don't forget
And Rome, of course, your home country. So you started off working in FMCG brands, moved through into quite a long spell in luxury, and then in 2015, moving into banking with Lombard Odier. What from the previous careers did you bring to Lombard Odier?
Yeah, it's eclectic, but there is a very common thread if you look at it, because the companies I work for always offer me the chance to work for brand development or business development of really interesting power brands, and they were all premium brands. So when I was working in Unilever, I was working for Magnum ice cream, which was at the time the most indulgent and premium ice cream offering on the market. In L'Oreal, I worked for Ralph Lauren, Lancôme and Armani. In Kraft, I was working for Côte d'Or. So there is like this real thread of focusing on great brands. I think, what fast-moving consumer goods give you, it's a solid skill set. It's a solid toolbox that then you take and bring along across your career. So what I learned was about rigor, research, analysis, which is very, very important. Even when you go into more unstructured businesses like luxury, you kind of find your way through in making sense of it all, thanks to the structure that you have developed in fast-moving consumer goods. So those 15 years between Unilever, Kraft, and L'Oreal have been very fundamental, a pillar for my career. I guess then what you get out of luxury and fashion is a more sophisticated approach to detail. So the obsession for the detail, more instincts as well, and then, of course, the beauty. So the fact that you can couple your approach, which is rigorous and analytical, to an obsession for beauty and detail makes it a pretty interesting, complete profile. And all of that then flourishes into a bank, which is Lombard Odier, where we have, a premium brand in wealth management, and where the attention to detail is extremely important as much as the rigor of the analysis. So it all comes through pretty much together in a way that makes total sense, and that's where I am today.
So were they actively looking for a marketeer from outside the banking sector when they approached you?
That's interesting. I think what they realized was that there was a compelling need to bring in marketing skills, because the Swiss private banking industry had gone through many pretty radical changes, and it was needed to position the banks in Switzerland in a way that was a little bit more clear and a little more attractive and compelling and relevant to the target audiences. So they went and looked for somebody. Now, they looked for somebody from luxury. And because there is an affinity, there is also an affinity in terms of clients, profiles and audiences. But I think the strength, why it's working, and I'm really happy to say it's working here. It's working for me, it's working for them, it's working for the bank and the brand. But it is because I had that fast-moving consumer goods base that I think the language and the understanding it's easier. I don't think that a pure luxury profile would have worked or would work in the same way into a bank.
Mm-hmm. So Shula, almost the same is true of yourself. I think you used the word, or perhaps I did, when we were chatting earlier. It was a tangential career, but you could also say eclectic. And you started off on the creative side of the business, the short, brief stopover working for a brand, and then moved to the media side of the industry, which I think is relatively unusual. What prompted that change, and are you pleased you made it?
I'm so happy I made the move. I cannot tell you. I think as a person, I am constantly in the pursuit of novelty and change. And I think we're in the business of problem solving. So I think much like Fabio, you develop a toolkit with which you approach any given problem. And actually having the ability to draw upon your experience from another angle of the conversation can prove to be a huge asset. So responding to a media brief with experience of a brand planner does help you look at things a little bit differently, and also helps you challenge conventions. So yes, I would agree that there have certainly been a number of jumps throughout my career, but in retrospect, they all seem to make sense because there was something new and different that I could bring to my various roles because of that tangential experience that I'd accumulated.
Would you say that the media industry is becoming more creative? I mean, I kind of think that it had a reputation of being kind of they were the people who just ticked boxes.
Totally. I cannot tell you. Even now, I cringe. At my very early creative agency days, I remember creative agencies, we used to have the big brand presentation with a big idea. And then when it was media's turn to talk, I am embarrassed to say I recall picking up my BlackBerry and going through email thinking, well, there's nothing. I need to get, which is horrific now. I'm admitting this with complete embarrassment. And to your question of whether media is becoming creative, media is creative. And as technology and data and possibilities emerge and flourish within this industry, it is becoming more and more apparent that brand and media thinking have to converge right from the start. And I'm a big champion of that belief.
And Fabio, is that your experience? Do you encourage your media and your creative from the get-go?
Totally. I mean, I think it is a critical part of the media mix, not just because it's where the money goes, but because it is true that there could be a very different impact of a great idea if it is vehiculated in the right channels, the right point, at the right time, the right way. So yes, it has to be integrated. It has to be integrated from the very start, briefing, and it needs to be a key component of a media and marketing approach. Yeah.
Belinda, I love that you mentioned that this year, the awards this year include a special section specifically for media strategy that receives a portion of the score. That's such a wonderful move. And perhaps it will send a signal to the last of the stragglers in our industry who may not yet have received the memo.
Yeah, no, we give equal weight to the media strategy, to the creative strategy in the scoring of these awards. You've been a judge on a number of occasions for all sorts of different awards, and you're also on the Film Academy as well, Shula. Obviously, you believe that benchmarking work is important. Do you get anything out of it personally? Why do you do that? Because it obviously takes up a lot of your time being a judge. It is quite demanding of the judges.
It's completely worth it. We are in an industry that never stands still. And no one who operates in marketing can afford for a moment to be complacent and think that they've arrived at the answer, because the grounds are always shifting. So I find that awards, events are fantastic sources of inspiration and also a barometer to sense check the direction of travel that communication strategies are heading in response to changing consumer demands, changing possibilities with media. It's also interesting to see that ideas that were considered so fresh and innovative in 2019 are old news in 2020. It really is. It's a constant game of keeping up. So it's a great privilege to be inspired by the best work the industry has to offer within that role.
I think, Fabio, when you first agreed to be a judge of this, I was talking to, I mentioned it to somebody, and they couldn't believe that you had agreed to be a co-head judge, because you were made a partner of the bank last year, and your time is incredibly precious. What persuaded you to that judging would be a good thing to do?
Yeah, I think you hit the spot. It's a very selfish decision. Honestly, I think on one side, I think that awards are important and the celebration of excellence is to be pursued. So I'm glad that I can contribute. Then there was, of course, the award itself, which attracted my attention and interest. But I feel a little bit like Shula. It is a privilege, and it is very useful in my position, in my place, because you basically have the chance to benefit from an observatory of worldwide insights. And then communication strategies, and all of that is united there in front of your eyes without much effort of research, because it just comes to you, and you can have a look at it broadly and thoroughly. So it's an amazing nourishment and a stimuli. So it's great.
So we did earlier this year, but in Jan-Feb, we did a survey among advertisers, agencies, and media brands around the world about what how they saw the future of content-led marketing. It's an annual survey that we do, and it's always interesting. This year, when we ask them about what they expect to happen in the future is always an interesting one, because obviously what people think are going to happen in the future and what does happen in the future does not always add up. So last year it was all about AR and VR, and obviously that has not really ever come to fruition. In terms of platforms this year, everyone is talking about podcasting, because obviously we're trendsetters here today. But thematically, what everyone was talking about really was around ESG and sustainability. So to reflect that, we have created a new award called the Award for Social Good. But obviously there is a concern around how to be authentic in this particular area, with literally, I think 80% were planning to be talking around sustainability in their marketing. How do you stand out? How do you get an authentic message through? Fabio, Lombard have long been, many years, have been aiming to achieve sustainable goals and talking about it. But what would, I think both of you actually, how would you, what would you be let's start, actually, Shula, let's start with you. What would you be recommending your clients to do in this area? How can you be authentic, or are there times when people really should be stepping away from it?
It's interesting. We have a live conversation at the moment with one of my clients around investing in a social good and purpose-led campaign. And without a doubt, it's authenticity and credibility that is at the heart of this conversation. And my counsel, I guess, would be, feels quite obvious. However, I'm going to say it. My advice to any brand would be, do the work before you talk about it and ensure that your efforts are long-term and your commitment is deep. My observation, certainly for brands that are operating within a market, my advice is to focus on initiatives that can be felt, that are close to home, that don't feel distant and far removed from consumers' day-to-day lives. And also, my third consideration, and this is sort of just off the cuff, would be consider what your hierarchy of messaging looks like. If you're wearing your cause like a big bandana around your head, then that is possibly a little suspect. If your role as the brand within the communication is enabling, facilitating, then perhaps consumers are more likely to be drawn in. So those would be my 3 criteria off the cuff.
And Fabio, so Lombard Odier have been kind of living and breathing this for a number of years already. But are you going to increase that? Just carry on as you are? Are you going to be changing how you approach it because everybody else is catching up with you?
I mean, first of all, I totally agree with what Shula said. I think there is no doubt that sustainability is the number one priority for us all. And when I say us all, I mean us as companies, but people and governments. So there is a strong relevance of the subject. Now, the difference is that we need to act and not just talk. And I think you're right. Authenticity, credibility, truthfulness, it's the name of the game. So we have the advantage, as you mentioned, at Lombard Odier, that we have like 2 centuries of sustainable thinking. And I mean it, like in 1841, Alexandre Lombard, which was one of the founders, actually counseled his clients to disinvest from the US Southern companies because they were relying on an unsustainable business model, which was slavery. So that was like just a principle and a fundament of how we think. And let's be honest too, we don't think of sustainability as just like a do-good kind of approach. We really believe that sustainability is a huge revolution of the economy. And therefore, it's the only way for our clients and ourselves to prosper is to change the way that we invest. So the investment opportunity is huge. And to grab it, you need to embrace a new, different way of looking at the economy and the opportunities that it presents. We have been consistently committing to that. We have been the first global wealth and asset manager to be awarded the B Corp certification in 2019. In 2007, we signed the UN Principles for Responsible Investment. In 2020, we became signatory of the Principles for Responsible Banking. So we are really front stage, both in terms of acts and in terms of thought leadership. It is my bread and butter in terms of positioning of the bank. We are definitely staying. This is core. Like we are basically revolving all our business model around sustainability. We are rethinking all our investment portfolios so that they are ESG compliant and more. ESG is just a part of the story. There is much more that involves the attitude of the management, which is governing those companies, the real steps that are transitioning towards the Paris targets agreements. So there is a lot that needs to be done, and we want to be definitely front stage in it. So yes, we
Fabio,
are. Sense.
Fabio, may I ask, out of curiosity, that sounds amazing, and what a fantastic standard to set for Lombard Odier. Sorry, forgive me, Belinda, because you're the host, but I'm just curious, the strategist in me. Do you wrestle with how much you communicate your strategy or the balance of your initiatives versus your brand in your communications and content?
I have a very strong advantage is that the brand, the way I reposition it, it's based on a credible and authentic storytelling that comes from the 200 history and heritage that we have, relies on a simple payoff, a signature line, which is rethink everything. So for me, to take sustainability as the most important subject to be rethinking about, has been pretty consequential. And it works very, very well, but slowly the rethink everything has become rethink investment, rethink sustainability. In the next campaign, we're going to rethink nature. So there is a constant approach. If I may highlight the difficulty in this is how to make an extremely complex thematic, which can go from simplistic to highly technical, and make it in something which is both a great promise, but with a strong reason why. And that encapsulate that in an ad with all the digital support that you can have. But that's the key challenge for people like us, in the creative and media industry. So that's the real thing in the campaign, is how do I distill the idea and then I make it understandable, but also like supported by really complex PhD technical approaches behind the investment strategies.
When we first approached you to be judges, we asked you both to fill out little questionnaires about your approaches, and but there was, both of you talked about in terms of what you were looking for. Shula, no, Fabio, you were talking about that you wanted it to teach you something, and Shula, you were talking about something you're hoping to be surprised. So it's I guess innovation, creativity, something a little different, but also being able to, Fabio, particularly you were talking about, business value, connecting with the customer and business value. What would be really helpful, I guess, for our listeners who I'm hoping all of them are going to think about entering fabulous work into the awards, is if you could give a few tips on what you mean by that. What are you really hoping to draw out to when you're judging?
So an observation that I've made over the years, my many years, is when it comes to awards entries, often you can categorize or broadly categorize the ones that are tackling and enduring consumer insight in a new way, or the ones that have uncovered something completely new because they set out to understand consumers in a different way that unlocked something completely different. And my advice to anyone filling in an entry would be, where is your center of gravity in your response? Because if the insight is a category insight that the industry has been tackling for years, convey it and move on. Don't try and persuade me that you've come up with it. But on the other hand, if the magic of the work you've done is what you are bringing that is new to the table and the impact that's had, then please give it all the attention and romance that it needs, and vice versa.
And Fabio, what are your top tips?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the winning entry is one that is capable of proving and arresting creative power, because I think that's the striking part of it, and then also show and demonstrate the effectiveness of that strategy. So the effectiveness has to be shown across platforms and throughout the marketing mix consistently. Was the work capable of, changing a behavior amongst the target audience? Did it lead to commercial impact? So the substantiation of that engagement from the audience and those business results, I think it's very important. So strong creative power, and then what is the impact, basically? But yes, you mentioned before that on a more personal note, what I really hoping to take out from here is something that I can learn, because there is so much going on, as Shula also pointed out before, that there are so many interesting approaches that can be leveraged. But the entry has to be really, really strong in those two dimensions. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Well, I am not a judge. However, I have sat through many judging panels in my time. So I would add two things to that, if you forgive me. One is remember that the judges are people, and they've got to read lots of different submissions. So make sure it's written well. write it like a story. And another one which we do see from time to time is make sure that the results match the challenge. So if you've set out certain specific, KPIs at the beginning in the challenge, make sure that the results actually speak to that challenge. We do quite regularly get submissions where the results really are you almost feel like they're for a different campaign completely. So from a non-judge's perspective, those are my 2 top tips. I would also like to remind everybody that the entry deadline is not until May the 20th, so you've still got lots of time to enter. We do have a slightly different approach to our awards, so it's really worth going and having a look at the website at the details, because work that you might not consider entering into other awards may well do very well in the World Media Awards, because they are structured differently. So do please have a look at the website. And with that, I would really like to thank Fabio and Shula for giving up their time today. I'm really looking forward to working with you both and sitting on the judging. And so thank you very much, Fabio, for joining us.
Thank you, Belinda. In bocca al lupo to all of those that will provide entries.
And thank you, Shula.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The World Media Group is an alliance of leading international media organisations that connects brands with highly engaged, influential audiences in the context of trusted and renowned journalism. I'm delighted to have as members The Atlantic, BBC News Global, Bloomberg Media, Business Insider, The Economist, Forbes, Fortune, Financial Times, National Geographic, New York Times, Reuters, Time Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, and The Washington Post. It is a great honour to work with all of them. Thank you.